God have mercy on us all.
Did I screw that up?
And you can get Listen Up for only $14.99.
Matt Miofsky is with us. He's the pastor of The Gathering in St. Louis. I want to ask you a few questions about the church, and then I want to talk about your book, or this book. But we were at a meeting, and I remember we had a little conversation, and I think you said, do people ever come up to you and just say, I don't want to bother you, I know you're really busy. I don't want to bother you, I know you're really busy. And Matt's like, I'm not really that busy. And I thought, I know, all right. It's like, everybody's like, I know you're really busy. I don't want to bother you. I don't want to take time out of your schedule. It's like, you and everybody else thinks that, which means
time to burn.
I've got time. Not to say we're not busy, Matt, but I'm just saying people think that we're like wake up in the morning and we go nonstop and like I don't want to call him or bother him.
Well, I don't want to get philosophical right off the bat here in the podcast, but it's not disconnected from this book. I mean, the idea of giving ourselves permission to not always be busy is a gift that we not only give ourselves, but give to the people around us. I mean, it's no fun trying to be in a relationship with someone who's always slammed. Neither is it fun to be that person who's always slammed. So I think part of maturity, at least as I understand it in faith, is, learning to let go of that need to either be or portray ourselves as always busy.
I think some people wear it as a badge of honor.
But we also live in a culture that rewards that as a badge of honor, right? It's not as if that comes out of the ether and we're just kind of our culture says, the busier you are, the more important you are.
Yeah. No, I can't take time off. I'm just
so busy.
I'm so busy.
Crushing it.
I'm just exactly
doing the Lord's work.
So Matt, tell us how are things going with you in St. Louis at The Gathering? Tell us a little bit about, I think the last time we talked to you, it might have been several years ago. We talked about The Gathering as a church that is evangelical in its nature. It believes in sharing and Christ with people and bringing people to Christ, but also as a church that's open to everyone who comes. And kind of that misnomer that churches that are more inclusive tend to be churches that decline or die. That's not the case in your context, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, The Gathering started 18 years ago. I and a small group of people started the church. We had the benefit of setting out a vision for the church that we didn't inherit, but one that we got to really listen to God and sort of bring to fruition on our own. And at that time, we just really felt strongly that the church for too long had seen a bunch of things as either or, either you're contemporary or traditional. I mean, a lot of people will remember that kind of argument. Some churches may still be having that, but 20 years ago, it was the thing, is worship contemporary or is it traditional? Are we going to focus on breadth or depth? Like, are we all about growth, or are we going to help people become deep in their discipleship? Or are we, and maybe the biggest one at the time was, are we progressive or liberal, or are we evangelical, which often meant conservative?
Christian?
Yeah, and people, do, and there's a whole host of things tied up in that. And we just looked at that and thought, what if there was a church that just could be both? That was unapologetic when it said, hey, we're an evangelical church. And I still say that. And I know that word has baggage for a lot of people, and I really appreciate that. We have a lot of people in our church who have been really hurt by the evangelical church. That name has been politicized. It's come to mean a certain kind of thing, and we're sensitive to that. But it also has a much older meaning of just being invitational, a church that believes that relationship with Jesus is important, and therefore we want to share that with new people and put a priority on reaching new people with the gospel. And we just believe that that's central to who the church is supposed to be. And we started as a church that welcomed people that a lot of churches didn't welcome. At the time, that meant in part LGBTQ people were invited into the full life of the church, full participation. Again, 20 years ago, that was a pretty controversial thing. I thought it would have changed more rapidly, but fast forward 20 years later, Methodism has just gone through its own, turmoil around the same question. And, John, as you know, and you and I have been part of these conversations, we have friends who just can't imagine a church that's both. It's either you believe in the Bible and therefore must recognize that LGBTQ people can't participate fully in the life of the church, or you don't believe in the Bible and you're liberal and you welcome all people. And there's a whole host of churches, ours being one of them, that just doesn't see it that way. And so now I think our challenge comes from both sides. I mean, we have to make sure that even as we're working for justice issues and inclusion of different kinds of people, or caring about the work that's happening in the world, we also have to remember our central task of sharing the gospel with new people. We can't let go of that need to be evangelical, to take the Bible seriously, to share Christ with new people. And then on the flip side, as we share Christ with new people, as we take the Bible seriously, as we prioritize that, we can't be afraid to continue to engage the questions that people have out in the world, and can't be afraid of including everybody, just as Christ did. And so I think that, I gave a talk recently at our jurisdictional conference that I think the church needs to become both more progressive and more evangelical. Right now, we have people who are afraid that we're becoming too much of one or the other. And I think we actually need to become more of both. And that's going to be where the future of the church lies, I think.
That's fascinating. Sorry I missed you at jurisdictional conference. My wife threatened to divorce me if I didn't go with her to visit her family in Colorado, so I wasn't able to be with you in Rogers, Arkansas, which Rogers sounds like a great place to be.
Well, two things. You made the right decision. And secondly, for those who live in Northwest Arkansas, you already know this, but Northwest Arkansas is, to many outsiders, shockingly both beautiful and has a whole bunch of cool stuff to do. So, yeah. We
went and visited years ago when my daughter was looking at colleges to Fayetteville.
Yeah.
And looked at the University of Arkansas, and I was amazed at, the kids can go in and give them their card and check out like a kayak or a tent or a camp stove, and
it's awesome.
And you're in the Ozarks in like 10 minutes.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
That's like,
Beautiful.
if you like that, University. Hey,
if you're into that stuff,
University of Arkansas, you can sponsor the podcast. Pod Have Mercy. Send us a little.
That's right.
NIL
And
money.
this is not to discount it's not to discount the rest of Arkansas, but Northwest Arkansas is sort of its own little region that's very different from the rest of the state. So,
hey, I was looking at your website at the gathering. When you all do, you have an online pastor?
Yeah,
Maggie.
That's right.
All right,
Maddie.
And then you have videos of sermons, but it looks like it's you all just preaching to the camera. Is that how you do sermon? Do you do that every week and then play those in the services, or do you do sermons in the services, or is this just for your online audience, or do these play into the campuses?
So, on Sunday morning, we're multi-site. Some of the venues I'm preaching live, and some of the venues I'm preaching via video. We record the video sermon at the end of the week. So I prepare my sermon, I practice it, people give me feedback on it, and then I preach it to an empty room. And what I love about that is, at first it was hard. What I've come to love about that is I can really focus on the people that I know will be listening to it, which is people who are going to be watching from home via video or at one of our sites via video. So I do preach that, and that shows both on Sunday morning at sites where I'm not physically present, and it's our online worship. And so if you come to the gathering on any given Sunday, you're going to hear the same sermon. It may be me live, it may be me via video. And if you worship at home, you'll also hear the exact same sermon that they're hearing in the space. But hopefully we're able to do it and tailor it towards the
So do you
person
tell
who's
people
watching.
which one, do you tell them in advance, like which one you're going to be in, or do you have to keep it a secret?
I don't keep it a secret, and I don't tell them. But if somebody comes
show up
every
at church
week,
like rats, we get Matt on video this week. I was looking forward to seeing
well,
it.
they call it flat mat. If they come and it's
Flat
video,
mat.
they call it flat
Where's
mat.
Waldo?
Yeah, they're like, who's preaching today? It's either Matt, flat Matt, or one of our site pastors. No, I preach at our largest original site live most weeks, and then I go to our other sites in a regular kind of rhythm. And so I get to be at the different places preaching live. So wherever you go, you're going to get a little bit of each of those. Site pastors preach sometimes. I preach sometimes live. I preach on video sometimes. And it's worked really well for us. And there's all sorts of ways for churches to do multi-site, which we could talk about on a different podcast, but it allows us the flexibility to have worship services whenever we want and not have to try to sync up in real time a sermon that's happening live over here and somehow do a live stream to some other place.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by that. We have different campuses. We call them worship communities, but they each have their own pastor, their own charism. I'm not preaching in every single other venue. The pastors of those communities are preaching in those venues, but it's a little bit harder to wrangle the culture. Sometimes, people kind of ride off in different directions. And so that makes it a little harder.
I think both models can work, right? There's all sorts of models of multi-site, and one has the benefit of kind of keeping culture and content and message unified across all the sites. And one really benefits from just the flexibility and freedom for each site to kind of talk about and shape what they do in worship to really fit the unique people that are coming to that place. So both can work.
Well, let's talk about this book. I had our bookstore order and been encouraging our people here at Chapelwood more and more to start introducing themselves to this if they don't have another devotional outlet. We've been doing a series as a fall kickoff. I keep joking around. It's on darkness. It's like light and dark, right? Light and darkness. And it's so funny because I feel so bad. I'm walking in fixing to talk about hard times in life and in the darkness, and God doesn't feel present. And I always have to apologize. I'm so sorry that I'm preaching this. But I had an email Sunday. We were talking about, there was a mother was with her two kids. And she said, I know it was a heavy sermon. I know it was about darkness. I know it wasn't as up as you wanted. She goes, I just want to let you know that I have my teenagers were there with me. And it led to a great conversation at lunch for them to know and understand in their own lives that it's not always going to be a sunny life. It's not always going to be sunshine and ponies and rainbows, that there's going to be dark times and heavy times, and God's there with you.
That's right.
And how we develop our ability to be able to see and sense God in that. To me, I think the spiritual formation is a part of that in a way that this book is helpful. So for people who don't know, the Methodist Book of Daily Prayer is a devotional book. It goes by sort of the liturgical calendar, starts in Advent before Christmas and then goes through the year. It really, you can jump in it any week you want. There are themes during the week, and every week has a morning prayer, an evening prayer of petition or gratitude, and then there are little small snippets of thoughts for the day, for each day of the week, including scriptures that are in there as well. And in your introduction, you say that the book was born out of hundreds of conversations with Christians and leaders and pastors who are tired. And I wonder if you'd unpack that, like the purpose of a devotion or a devotional like that. I think people write them or produce them or put them together for a lot of reasons, but your motive was there was a certain kind of fatigue that you were experiencing in people's lives that a personal day or a vacation or a long weekend is not going to solve. Talk a little bit about why you put this together, the motivation behind these conversations.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking the question, and it's a big one. I'm going to kind of divide. Let me talk really broadly, and then I'll talk specifically about like the role the book plays. The genesis of this book really came out of two sermon series that I preached at the gathering. One was called Rest, and the other one was just called Sabbath. And I talked about this idea that, one of the first things that we learn about God is that God rested. God created and God rested. And then God gave this gift of rest to people. It's one of the 10 commandments. If you read the 10 commandments, interestingly enough, it's the longest one it takes up more space than almost all the other ones combined. It's also the one that God has to explain the most. It's almost like God knew that we weren't going to take this seriously. And so there's this rhythm of life that God sets up in Scripture. And the rhythm is 6 days on, 1 day off, 6 days on, 1 day off. God practices that, God's self, God gives it to us to be our way of life. And then God tells us in no uncertain terms, this is really important. It's like as important as don't kill, don't, lie, don't covet your neighbor's wife, and practice the Sabbath. I mean, it's one of the 10. Yeah. And it's just really interesting to me that, fast forward thousands of years, and most of us still believe killing somebody is a pretty big deal. Like, we probably shouldn't do that. Most people are like, lying, is a big deal. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Stealing, not really great. But this Sabbath thing, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, if you're going to sin, certainly the sin of working too hard or not taking a break doesn't seem so bad. And we've just decided this somehow isn't really a big deal anymore. And I think that move to discounting what God gave us has really wreaked havoc on our lives. Yeah. It's cost us in all sorts of ways. And I kind of joke around, although it's not a joke, like when I preach on this, that this is one of those commandments that I think God meant literally. God literally meant he wants us to have a rhythm of life, a healthy rhythm of life. We are not living day to day, week to week lives that are sustainable and healthy. And we need to build back into our lives margin or rest. Yeah. I say this line, we have to be really careful not to build lives that we want to escape from. And I think a lot of us have done that. We've built lives that we want to take a vacation. We need a vacation from them because they're not healthy. So rather than needing a vacation from them, what if we build a healthy rhythm of life? So I'll set that aside. That's just a reality. I think in our culture, and we kind of started off this way, we wear it as a badge of honor. We are worth whatever we produce. We feel the need to one-up one another and how busy we are. We feel obligated to have our kids signed up for everything. Otherwise, they might fall behind and not get into a good school and not be great adults. I mean, whatever it is, we've just convinced ourselves that more is better. So how do we begin to push back against that? Well, there's all sorts of things that we can do. But one small, simple thing I think we can do is start building margin into every day of our life that's dedicated to God. Now, we as pastors, John, you'll know this, like we're really good at saying like, hey, you should be spending time with God every day. You should be reading your Bible or praying or, finding a way each day to thank God. But a lot of our people, they're like, yeah, I mean, I want to do that, but I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know what to do every day. Like, how am I supposed to pray every day? And so the idea for the book specifically came out of really the pandemic. During the pandemic, so many people were at home. We weren't having in-person church. People were feeling the consequences of that. And I was getting a lot of questions. Hey, Matt, do you have anything like that can just help me at home stay connected to God? Is there any good devotional, any good book? And the truth is, there are a lot of devotionals out there. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to criticize other devotionals, but it was really hard to find a devotional that was both simple and accessible that I felt like I could give to anyone in my church to use, and one that had some depth to it. It wasn't theologically shallow or kind of represented a theology that maybe was different from what we really believe in. So there were a few resources that I thought were a little cheesy, to be honest. They're shallow, they're easy, they're accessible, but they're kind of shallow. And then on the flip side, there were some resources in the Methodist Church, but they were pretty confusing and bulky and kind of clumsy to try to do yourself at home. So I looked around for these devotionals, and finally I felt the burden like, hey, if there's not something simple out there, maybe I should write one of these. A simple book, a devotional that would help people to begin practicing some time each day that is directed towards God. And that's what led to the book. And I had a couple of things. I wanted it to be really easy to use. That didn't matter if you knew the Bible, didn't know the Bible, were an expert in prayer, never had really prayed before, doesn't matter. I wanted it to be easy to use. I wanted it to give you a lot to think about. Again, whether you're brand new to the faith or you've been doing this a long time, I wanted it to be, hey, it really gives me something to think about. And I wanted it to be possible to do in less than 3 minutes in the morning. That's not to say you can't take longer with it. And in fact, I encourage you to take longer with it. But I wanted it to be something that you didn't need to have 30 minutes in order to do. And so that's really what led to me writing the book. I wanted to write a devotional that would help people figure out a way to start praying and connecting with God regularly at home. I want it to be a devotional. Like you said, it has every week has a theme. There's a morning and evening devotional. I often tell some people want to do both. Some people are like, Matt, if I do one a day, that's a huge win for me. I say, that's great because you're going to get 2 years out of the book instead of 1 year. 1 year, do the morning. Next year, do the evening. You've got 2 years worth of devotionals right there. It was structured, like you said, with a theme each week, and the morning has a prayer practice, and the evening has a prayer practice. And so each devotional is a prayer practice, a scripture, and just a very short devotion that goes with that scripture. All the scriptures are printed in the book. You don't need a Bible or anything else in order to do it. And what I wanted is it to be something that people could pick up and start making time each day in the rhythm of their day. And so I tell people, you can do this in 3 minutes. It can be, when you sit down at work, when you wake up in the morning and you're eating breakfast, when you're whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, I wanted it to be easy for people to begin the practice. So that's really why I wrote it. In a larger way, I think this practice is one small step towards reclaiming a little bit of our time each day, where we're not doing, but we're just trying to connect with the one who created us. So that's really the genesis and behind the book. And what I love is the feedback I'm getting is there are people who are brand new to church coming to my church who are saying, hey, this is really helpful. Thank you. I don't really know how to pray. I didn't know what you meant when you said read the Bible. I didn't know where to start. This is helping me to have a way to connect with God each week. And then all the way to pastors who, again, let's be really honest, a lot of pastors do not do this. We read the Bible for work, to write a sermon. We pray in meetings, but we don't have a good rhythm of connecting with God. So I've had a lot of pastors who they know a lot, they've read the Bible a lot, and they're finding this practice really meaningful. One other quick note is, like, I wrote all the morning devotionals, and the evening is a mixture of historical writings and also original content that's written by a diverse group of pastors from around the country. And so that's been kind of fun as well, to have other voices included in the book.
Interesting. That's beautiful. We've been doing this series on light and darkness, and of course a lot of it about the darkness. And one of the weeks I've gone back because I don't remember what week it is. It was you have week 40 is the theme of the week is darkness. And one of the actually I'm going to totally steal my opening sort of illustration or lead in for the sermon. You tell a story, if I may be putting you on the spot, about Charles O'Rear, who took that most famous photograph that more people have seen than any other photograph in the world. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I do. I do remember it.
And
it was.
Go ahead, tell it.
For those who are wondering, it's the Microsoft, the screensaver, the stock screensaver for Microsoft.
And it doesn't look real. I mean, it's so perfectly green hill, the sky blue with the clouds.
Yeah.
And as soon as you see it, you're going to go, oh, I've seen this. Because if you've ever been on a Windows computer in the last however many years, you've seen this picture.
Yeah. Right. And it's an actual picture.
It's not photo edited. I mean, it's not
AI.
It's not AI generated, not Photoshop. It doesn't look real.
But keep going. You were saying.
No, I was just saying
gonna...
one of the things that I appreciated about that was, well, I started digging into this guy, Charles O'Rear, and the point you make in the book was there had been this storm and everything had been really dark. It's there at Napa and Sonoma in California.
Yeah.
And he's a photographer. He was working on a book, and he was actually driving one Friday to visit what was at the time was his girlfriend that they ended up being married. Yeah. So I've seen some articles where it's kind of the picture was born out of a love story. But the part you focused on was that it had been a very the whole landscape in Napa, Sonoma had been darkened because of these storms that come through this time of the year. And as he was driving down the road, the storm had lifted, and he just thought, wow, the grass looks like really popping green. And he got out and he took these pictures. And it's just interesting to me that it's a picture that doesn't look real. It looks artificially enhanced. And yet it's the picture of a real place that had just been in this deep darkness, but that life came out of it. And thinking about like when Barbara Brown Taylor, you quote part of her as well, that, you know, these are where things are birthed out of darkness. You know, the seed is germinated in the ground in the dark. You know, a baby is born out of the womb in the dark. All these things happen. And that's where healing starts. That's where peace starts. That's where resurrection starts. It always starts in the darkness, and then these things come. But we often don't see that because darkness for us is the bad, and we want to get out of it.
Right.
And so part of the devotional life, what we're trying to talk about too, is paying attention that not only God is there, but when you're in the darkness and you can't sense that God is there, what do you need to be doing in the good times to prepare yourself, something like this or other things, to prepare yourself for when it does come, that you'll be able to kind of see and sense what's happening, even though it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, you know, the resurrection story in the Gospel of John begins that way, the Easter story. It says, you know, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. And that's the beginning of the story. And so the beginning of the Easter story happens in the dark. And of course, it was literally dark. She went really early in the morning to the tomb to check it out. And it was emotionally and spiritually dark. I mean, the beginning of the Easter story was in the middle of grief, in the middle of loss, and the middle of everything that they had expected kind of coming to an end. And yet that's when God was doing something new. And if Mary wouldn't have gone to the tomb while it was still dark, she wouldn't have gotten to see and been the first witness to, you know, the beauty of resurrection. And that photograph is sort of just a small approximation of that idea. You know, here's this awful, you know, the storms and everything was terrible. But if he wouldn't have been driving kind of through that storm, then he wouldn't have been there right when it lifted. And right when it lifted, the grass did pop and the sky was really blue. And it was a picture that could have only been taken if you were starting in the dark, so that you were ready when something new came. And I think spiritually speaking, like what you're talking about, it's probably why people in your congregation, even though it's dark, are saying, hey, thank you for this. Because let's be real, in the church sometimes we avoid talking about painful things in life, and we either because we don't want to be, you know, we don't want to be a bummer. People come to church and, you know, get depressed when they leave. But I think the danger of not talking about real things is we don't give people any tools or sense of how to navigate really hard times in their life when God doesn't feel very faithful or God feels far away. So I love that you're talking about it. And oddly enough, talking about the dark can be one of the more hopeful things that we do in the church. And yeah, the devotional, you know, where I think that fits in is connecting with God when things are going really well can often give us the sort of foundation to lean on when things aren't going well. Yeah. And connecting with God when things aren't going well helps us to be positioned and ready when we begin to see God doing new things in our life. I think part of the struggle of going through really difficult seasons in life is we're tempted to disconnect. And I actually think this is the evil one. One of the devil's greatest tools is making us think that during seasons of hardship, maybe we should just step back from all this, so that we actually distance ourselves from the God who is at work in our lives. And it sometimes can take us longer then to begin to see the new direction that God is trying to bring out of some of the struggles in our life. And so if we can learn to stay connected in the dark, even if we can't see God at work, even if we don't exactly know where it's going, we're going to be positioned to see God when God begins to do a new thing. And we know that God does new things. You can look back, and anybody listening here can look back on, I always invite people, look back on some of the best things that have ever happened to you. And then what happened right before that? Oftentimes, it's in the wake of really difficult things in our life that really beautiful things begin to happen for us. You know, we lose a job and we're going through a really difficult time. But that leads us to a place of doing something really new that we've come to enjoy and love. We can't imagine going back. You know, sometimes the ending of a relationship, which is awful and just kind of sucks for several weeks, months, or longer, helps us to discover certain things about ourselves and leads us to an even healthier, beautiful, sustainable relationship. And there's a million more examples of that. Yeah. And so we can see that historically. So when we're in it, we need a tool to stay connected. So again, the book, a simple way to just try to stay connected to God, so that as God moves and as God does God's work of resurrection in our life, we're in close proximity to begin to see it.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I love this. I think one of those things that I'm finding too is like Abraham Joshua Heschel's book on Sabbath, which I think is really great. One of the things he often says is that in a community of faith, there'll be times that I lose faith, but I'm sitting next to somebody who has faith. And that often prayer is done in a communal setting with each other is that there's times I don't know how to pray. I'm in the dark and I'm lost in the dark, but if I'm in community, I'm never alone in that space. And there's a difference between being cut off, and I think often we have a hard time talking about darkness because we as pastors have not dealt with that on our own. We haven't gone to those places that are in despair or forsaken in our own lives and made peace with those things. And so I think part of that communal sense of prayer is that we do this together. This is a we program. It's not a me program, you know, and I think prayer is to be that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And some people have asked me, you know, Matt, why is it only 5 days a week instead of every day? And by the way, I am writing a 6th day that will come out in a revised version sometime next year. But I still want to only write 6 because I think that the 7th day we're invited to pray in community, exactly what you just said. And I want us to recognize that as important as it is to build a rhythm into our personal lives, it's very important and powerful to also listen to God when God says, you know, don't neglect gathering together with others. Because there's something that can only happen when we pray in community. And so I want it to be 6 days a week because the 7th day, I want us to do it together in worship. Find a church, find a place that you can go, and let that be your prayer on day 7.
Yeah, and I think was your friend from Texas Tech, Kitty, Kitty Harris, that did the stuff on how she studied resilience. And I just am always amazed at the top three things that contribute to resilience are connectivity, social connections, and family connections.
That's right.
And the social connections are just the connections beyond your immediate family.
Yeah.
And the social connections one was actually by far the biggest contributor to resilience.
That's right.
And so part of this that I want to be careful as we're talking with people here about darkness, and I think it's important, is sometimes we think of our faith as like it's my faith. It's very individualistic. And so devotionals like can drive you. It's like, oh, this is just me in my own time. You have to have that, but you also have to have a communal quality to it. So I like that you give the 7th day, say, hey, this is the day you need to be doing this work together in community, not just by yourself.
And I think if we practice it that way, it goes, first of all, praying and finding a way to connect with God in 3 minutes a day helps us when we come to church to actually, hey, this is a conversation I've been having all week, and now I get to do it alongside other people. It actually enhances our experience of Sunday morning worship. And similarly, our experience of worshiping in community enhances those daily those daily devotionals that we do. And so neither one of these things replaces the other, but actually I think our experience, if church is dry for you, or you feel like you're going through the motions, or you sort of feel like I've been doing this a long time, I promise you, if you begin incorporating a little bit of daily devotion into your life, the richness of church oftentimes pops back out for you. You begin to experience it in new and fresh ways. Mm-hmm. So I tell people who've been Christian a long time, this is one of the best things you can do for yourself.
Yeah. I think, as we kind of wind it down, I think one of the things that I've noticed a lot, and I think the pandemic just accelerated the reality of this, is that we did not do a good job, generally speaking, at the church of discipling people. Yeah. And what I mean by that is preparing them for difficulty or struggle. Yeah. And we had created a community of disciples that a mile wide and an inch deep. Yeah. And so as soon as the roots got stressed, they just faded, and they had no recourse, no ability to. And that's why I think people behave so badly. And that's why I think the biggest threat to the American church are Christians. I mean, not unchristian, not non-Christian, not the secular world. I think it's like the damage we do to ourselves by all of this pain and grief coming out sideways, and then we attack each other. And it's become very, the politics and everything. We choose sides. And I think part of it is we've got to do the work of, like the psalmist says, you want to be a tree planted by the water where the roots go down deep and you produce much fruit. I think we got to focus sometimes on those roots and how deep are they going, and what are we doing to prepare ourselves for the next season of darkness, which will come. It sounds depressing though when you say it, when you preach these messages and you tell. It's like, I was meeting with a lady this morning, and she just stopped by. She said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes?" I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "I know we're talking about darkness. My husband's 95, and we've been married for 40 years, and." And I just can't imagine. And she's just all this anxiety and fear about losing him. And the only thing I could think of is we talk about this darkness. She goes, "Yeah, I know." I said, don't spend all your time left with him in fear of him being gone. Spend the living moments in this moment, even though some are dark, with him and with God, you together, so that you're enjoying the fact that he's here before you now. And it's hard for us to see things that are right in front of us that we, I guess it's not an interpretation, but it's a perspective. Yeah. And I think faith is a lot about perspective.
And I really wrote the book, John, to your point, to be both a response to what we learned through the pandemic, which was we aren't growing deep roots. And as a church and as pastors, we're often not giving people tools that can help them to grow those roots. And so the book is both a response to that and a tool, hopefully, to help people begin to grow those roots. And secondly, your point about darkness, I think that metaphor of darkness and light is really an important one. There's a lot of us going through seasons of struggle, and there's a lot to learn there, and there's habits that we can form there that will help us. There's also like another group of people who are like, Matt, life's fine. But I'm just feeling kind of distant from God. And they'll tell me the pandemic was certainly this for a lot of people. I just sort of fell off, and I feel distant from God and disconnected. And I would say, well, what are you doing to try to cultivate that relationship? And they would often say, nothing. I mean, I went to church, and without church, I'm just sort of not doing anything. And so, it's a reminder to me, like, we have to put the work in if we want a relationship that's deep, that sustains us. We have to practice the faith. It doesn't just fall out of the sky. We have to actually, it's a gift given to us freely, but we have to receive the gift and practice it if we want it to begin to transform our lives. And so I've really challenged people in my congregation. I know it's work, but you will see the way in which this work will pay off. It will begin to shape you and benefit you in really profound ways. Something as simple as 3 minutes a day. If you do that for a week, and then for a month, and then for 3 months, and then for a year, it will absolutely transform your relationship with God and your faith. But we have to put a little bit of work in. And so another way in which I see the book is it's sort of like your workout plan. Like if you want to begin working out spiritually and seeing your spiritual life transformed some, this book's a great sort of a workout plan. Just gives you something to follow. Yeah,
spiritual
right.
deadlifts. Well, for those of you who may be interested, it's called the Methodist Book of Daily Prayer. We have it here at Chapelwood.
If you're Baptist, keep moving. Just move on.
No, Baptists can use the Methodist Book of Daily Prayer. Anybody can use it. I mean, think of how many years we've been using the Book of Common Prayer.
Yeah.
From the Anglicans or the
Fantastic.
Divine Office. It came from the Catholics or whatever. I mean, I've used all that stuff. I would encourage people to get the book and to take the time. My one recommendation or request would be, the Divine Office, I have on Apple Podcasts every day, or there's an app that I can pull up the app, the Divine Office, and I can audio play the devotional, or of course, Divine Office has like 5 or 6 prayers per day, right? But you need to get some young, hip, really smart young kid create an app for your Methodist Book of Daily Prayer. So when people who don't do books, they can just wake up in the morning and hit play, and Matt Miofsky, comes on and reads them.
Or Matt McConaughey.
Oh, Matthew McConaughey.
I think that would be the person to read your prayers.
We might be able to set that up for you.
All right.
He's a Texan, right? Y'all can figure that out.
That would be awesome. But it is a great book. I've been using it in my own devotional life. And like you said, I think we preachers, we don't do enough devotion, personal devotional stuff. We just get ready for Sundays or Bible studies. And it's really more of a work sludge kind of process. Rather than because you're moving towards accomplishing a task, and you're using the Bible for that. But you're trying. There's not just sitting there's just nothing I'm trying to prepare for. This is just for God to pour into me. Right. We don't do that a lot, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I would encourage people to look at it. You can go online. You can get them on Amazon, or I guess wherever Abingdon made this book. I will tell you, you can also get it on Kindle. I'm a big Kindle e-reader. So I use it on my laptop, on my phone. It's always there with me.
Yeah, and I tell people, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Abingdon. You can also walk into any bookstore. If you have a favorite little bookstore, just tell them they can order it. Any bookstore can order. Just give them the title. If you have a local independent bookstore that you love, just let them know you want it, and they'll order it.
And support local businesses. Bookstores are not around as much as they used to be. So, well, Matt, thanks for being with us today and visiting, talking about this book. I'm excited about it, and I'm excited about more people here utilizing it in our journey. And I hope the word gets out even more broadly about it. How long has it been out now?
It's been out, it's almost a year. It'll be a year this holiday season. It kind of came out Thanksgiving time last year. So we're coming up on a year. And people gave it away as a stocking stuffer last year, which I thought was cool. It's a gift to other people. But I really appreciate the chance to be on with you guys. I always love talking to you. And I appreciate, John, you using the book, but really just encouraging your people to grow those roots that'll sustain.
Yeah, the one last thing that I really like about this that I have not seen in other, you have a theme for the weeks, and in the back you index the themes. So for me or for anyone else, if you're suddenly going through, you need patience, or you're dealing with needing rest, or timing or purity. I mean, whatever the theme is, you can go and it'll tell you exactly where to go on that particular week.
Great.
So it's almost like remember those things like scriptures for peace, and they would give you it's like you can do the same thing with this. So I think the devotional gives you a lot of options and ways to intersect with it. But I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks,
Hope
brother.
St. Louis continues to do well, and your church, The Gathering, will be praying for you guys and all the great things as you are kicking off fall, just like probably the rest of us are.
Hey, thank you, John and Matt. It's really great talking with you. And hey, invite me down sometime. I'll talk about this stuff in your church.
I would love to. We'll do it. No doubt.
All right.
All right. Appreciate you, brother.
See you guys.
Take care.
Thanks. So what do you do in your devotional life? Do you have a regular thing?
I do.
I put you on the spot. I'm sorry, Jeff.
No.
Like all of a sudden it comes out, Matt Russell doesn't do a daily devotional.
Never. I'm against it.
Breaking news on the podcast. John asked him, and he
No, I've got a chair in that's my chair that I sit in, and
no one else can sit in it.
No one else can sit in it.
Okay.
No, they can, but it's in my little office, and I do a couple of different things depending on what I'm going through. I've been an avid journaler since I've been like junior high, so I will either journal. I started meditating and doing kind of just more meditation about 5 or 6 years ago to deal with my anxiety, and that's really been helpful. I read, and then I'll use books like Matt's to occasionally to form prayers and to lead me through prayers and places I don't often get to on or can't get to on my own. So yeah, it's kind of the smorgasbord.
It's kind of the same with me. I mean, I've really enjoyed getting into this book. I do also use the app. There's an app and podcast. So like you can subscribe to the Daily Office.
Yes.
And so every day it refreshes, comes, and I can just put in my head from walking the dog and I can listen.
Yes.
And then the app that I have used a lot through the years, and again, this one may be a little much for some folks, but the app's called Divine Office, and so every day you can see here. I mean, those are the list of all of the prayers. So you can actually click them, and it'll take you to the specific prayers in writing with the hymns, the prayer, the scriptures, or you can play it audio. It'll read to you with the music, so you can also use the app.
Does Matthew McConaughey read it?
It's not Matthew McConaughey reading. It is someone I don't know.
Okay.
That it is not. No, it's no movie stars. Probably some.
It's almost like what's that sleep app that has his, the stories on there? Yeah.
A spirituor community somewhere that reads it. But
can I say this too?
Great. Yeah.
I've also really struggled at times with not doing anything. You know what I mean? I've not done things for like seasons of my life where I just feel like, and then I'll get like super dry and wonder, wow, why am I so parched? And that kind of invigorates me. But there's also been times I've not done anything. So
one of the things in Matt's in the intro section, he talks about, hey, you may miss a day, you may miss whatever. He goes, don't
6 years.
Don't.
Just saying.
I haven't done my morning devotional in 5.5 years since 1992. But and he makes the point. He's like, don't heap a lot of guilt or shame on yourself. Just jump back in wherever, and you don't even feel. And he even says, don't feel like you have to go back and read all the ones that you missed. And I love that. He's like, your habits and your needs and circumstances are going to change. So that's why this resource is flexible. And, in some seasons you may only read scriptures and daily reflections, other seasons, just the prayer practices, that you may use. So I love the way he does it. It's just like, it gives you a way to sort of come into it however you want. He needs to get like a leather bound version,
Oh yeah. That'd be
like
pretty sweet.
that would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's fun to talk, always fun to talk to Matt. I always love to see him when we're at these meetings wherever.
He's a good guy.
He's smart, and his church is dynamic. They've been growing. It's a little hipper, than me. You notice he doesn't wear shirts with collars. And
how do you feel about pre-recording your sermons like he does? Doesn't that seem like a lot of...
We did that during
did
COVID.
that.
We
Yeah.
did it during COVID. It is interesting. So I think that would be, it might be interesting to have Matt and Adam Hamilton on and talk about, because I think they do multi-site similarly. And of course, the Church of the Resurrection in Kansas City has been really expanding to these other churches through the seasons where some of these churches are not doing real well. So they'll come in and they kind of take them over, and then, they video Adam in, or in Matt's case, in his campuses, they video him in, or whoever's preaching that week. I think for us here, that would be, if we started a new community somewhere and you started it that way, but to come into one of our worship communities and say, okay, you're going to start getting John videoed in, there would probably an uprising.
Our culture is so different, isn't it?
It is. And I think, I don't think that means good or bad, but I think about Paul Myler, our pastor for the Fairhaven campus, and those people, when we merge with that, they need their pastor that's with them, that's in the room with them, that's talking to them, and that's loving them and communicating with them and visiting them. And so to me, I've always believed part of is that, and I guess I learned this from Fred Craddock and some others, that, preaching is deeply communal.
Yes.
It's not.
Yes.
And again, I'm not saying anything against the way Matt and Adam, because a lot of do it that way, and it's very successful, right? And the way they handle the communal part is they have site pastors, so they'll have pastors that are there, part of the community, and they'll preach some in their community too. So that's how they handle that. But for us, at Chapelwood, we always talk about embody grace, embody Christ. And so for us in worship communities, it's a lot harder to control and manage, but for these communities to have their own pastor that is incarnate, embodying who we are at Chapelwood there. And that's the way we've done it. Now, we've started communities, and we've had to close communities, and we have one community that we birthed that's now, we're the only United Methodist Church to ever plant an Episcopalian church. Successfully, and it's doing well, Father Jacob Reese, used to be with us, and now he is Episcopalian. I mean, that's the kind of interesting way of saying, we don't control all this stuff. Right? It's not under our control necessarily, but I think there's different ways to do it. I think they're all good. They all have pros and all have cons. But to answer your question, no, I would not want to. I mean, I just can imagine some poor person walking into the other campus and going, crap, who's this dude? I'm going to listen
There's
to him.
Flat John.
Flat John. Yeah, no, I don't know.
Yeah. I think the other side of that is that it may cause some, you don't have as much, like you were saying, control, but I'd rather have that end of it, with these kind of rich conversations of folks that are living in those spaces than, I think there's something about the way we're doing that just feels right for us right now, and like you said, there's nothing wrong with other approaches. I just like the way it's emerged here in some ways. Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. Make sure if you like the podcast, you subscribe, go to it, hit the little bell, the notification on your YouTube or your thing, and then it'll send you. It's like, hey, Matt's here.
John's here.
Matt wants to talk to you in the podcast. All right. Well, this is fun. I'm John Stevens.
I'm Matt Russell.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.